Hello, everyone, and welcome to ITSM and Educational Institutions, the unique challenges and how to solve them. My name is Tabitha Ishman, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Excalibur Data Systems, and I wanted to welcome all of you to the webinar today. And then I'm just going to talk about a few logistics before we go ahead and get started. The lines are muted and the webinar is being recorded. So the recording will be sent via email to all participants tomorrow, and then you can also find it on our YouTube channel as well. We'll answer questions at the end in a Q&A session, and you can ask questions at any time during the presentation just by typing them into the question window. And now I'm just going to talk about a little bit about Excalibur Data Systems. Is that we are a leading edge consulting firm guiding organizations through their digital transformation journey. We work with strategic partners and leverage best of breed enterprise service management technologies. In doing so, we help create next generation solutions for our customers. And I know we have a lot of great content for all of you today. So to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Senior Solution Architect and Consultant with Excalibur Data Systems, Mike Fuson.
Thank you, Tabitha, and welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Lucrecia Chandler, who is the ITSM and Communications Manager at Sam Houston State University, specifically IT at Sam, which is their moniker for their IT department. Lucrecia, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So a little way of a story. I've had the pleasure of working with Lucrecia for a number of years. We'll just say it's been more than 5, and had the pleasure of working with the team at Sam Houston and IT at Sam to implement their service management solution way back when. So Lucrecia and I, of course, have talked and collaborated over the years. And many of the things that we're going to talk about today are challenges, Lucrecia, that you guys have experienced over time in just growing as an institution, but also growing into your ITSM system.
Absolutely. You try to project as best as you can when you're bringing on a new system. Try to guess where the problems are going to lie, and you're never going to be 100% at the onset. So it was really good to have you as a partner during that transition to help us through some of those problems.
Yeah, and as we kind of go through our presentation today, we'll talk about that is in and of itself one of the challenges that's somewhat unique to educational institutions, is that constant evolution, where it's not that organizations don't evolve, but you guys are kind of forced into a hamster wheel of evolution all the time.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but you're constantly having new 18-year-olds come into your organization, and with them, all of their expectations. And so you do, as a university, you have to evolve to be able to serve those people as you serve, maybe some of the non-traditional college students, and kind of meet them where they are at that time. And so we absolutely have to change our business model frequently to meet those expectations.
So let's dive right in. And one of the things that's always been interesting to me in working in the education space, whether that be at the university space, in higher ed, or a K through 12 sort of scenario, is that unlike many organizations where you have a single customer that you're working with, you are actually serving multiple personas. So you have students, you have faculty, and you have staff that all have different needs. Some of them may revolve around a similar technology, say the learning management system, but the needs are different. What a staff member needs may not apply to the learning management system, but what faculty needs and a student needs are very, very different. And then staff have their needs. And then you add on to that the concept of an individual actually having multiple personas. So, and you've got some real life examples of this where somebody could be one, two, or all three of these personas, and you've got to be able to service them and have your design and the structure of your system and platform be flexible enough to serve all of these personas. So you start to look at a self-service portal and its service catalog, and the security that goes into who can ask for what. Really has to be a huge consideration of how your design is built in order to properly serve folks, but then also be flexible enough when they have more than one persona to be able to present them everything they may need. And I kind of go to that learning management system example, and what a student may ask for in a learning management system is going to be very different than what a faculty member may ask for. However, a graduate student who has the ability and is taking classes and is using student resources may also be a faculty member. And I know you have kind of an example of that, that it is real life and very close to home for you.
Yes, I do. So my husband worked here at Sam Houston State University several years ago. So in his role, he was a staff member. So during that tenure of being a staff member, he decided he wanted to get his doctorate degree. So he enrolled in a doctoral program here at SAM. So that gives him a staff role as well as a student role. And during that program, in the course of his studies and that sort of thing, he offered to teach some classes. And so that gives him the faculty role at that point. And so in addition to all of that, so for some additional complexity as far as a university goes, he had also completed an undergrad degree. He had already earned a degree at Sam Houston. And so that gave him an alumni role. And so it all in one person, and at one time, he was an alumni, he was a student, he was faculty, and he was staff, all at one time. And so him having all of those roles, he has a bigger array of ask, I guess, that he can ask of IT based on each of those. And one other thing that we have as far as the university goes is we hire a lot of contractors. We have buildings and things like that where we hire those contractors, but we also have people come in and fill actual faculty or staff roles for us for a certain amount of time. And so while they're not true Sam Houston employees, they are fulfilling a staff role. And so how do you give those folks the appropriate access to make their requests, to do their jobs that a traditional staff member maybe inherently has? So, trying to keep all of these scenarios in mind as you're implementing an ITSM and service catalog and portal, it's very important to kind of get all of your scenarios out in line as you're working toward implementation.
Yeah, I kind of completely forgotten about the whole alumni discussion, where alumni and you're even seeing some commercials on TV from some of the universities that advertise on national television about services that they didn't have available before that now are available to alumni. And alumni can ask for various services from the organization as well. And that, like you said, that this adds to the complexity where you start to look at a particular service, what personas can ask for this service. As a staff member, as we kind of used in our example, really probably never worries about what the LMS system is.
Right.
It's not something they're consuming. Same for a faculty or a student, where they may not be worried about certain back-end pieces of the accounting system or the ERP system. But you do have components of each that might be services that folks can consume. And so what are my roles? And I think back to my days in college, a decade or 2 or 3 ago, and I was a student, but much like Jacob, I was also a faculty member as a graduate student, and I was also a student worker on staff. And so it was always, in those days, it was kind of amusing because we didn't have some of the technology available to us to make it easy. And I remember running around with 2 different ID cards because one's a student ID card and then one's a staff ID card. Because staff ID card got me into areas of buildings that students weren't allowed to go. I have to remember to have both of them with me, to do the things that I needed to do in whatever role I was fulfilling at the time. And so this is not a concept that many organizations have to fulfill. In some cases, they might have, contractors and staff, but they're generally consuming similar services. You start to have this amalgam and the ability to consume multiple types of personas. It does, things that you have to really think about and consider in the overall design of how you're setting things up so it's flexible. And I know with the designs that we've done in this, conceptually for this and work with customers to implement in the education space, once you've got 3 of them in there, adding a 4th one, if it's designed correctly, is not an extremely difficult thing to do. It gives you, you've built the flexibility and the design into it, but it takes some time to get it right in the beginning. We'll talk about service catalogs a little bit later because I know that's always a topic that you love, is talking about the service catalog, because you've been doing this for a while, and I always love the story behind the service catalog of it being really almost a living, breathing organism, because it doesn't sit still.
No, it certainly doesn't sit still for long.
And so the one of the other concepts is communications and support opportunities. In a corporate entity, there are common ones that parallel education, self-service portals and emails, potentially walk-up support. We're starting to see some corporate entities get into that, chat support, but social media and Twitter are in many cases not things that a corporate entity really are using, because they don't want to tweet out that we're having an outage of our accounting system, because they don't want that to go out to the whole world. But it's a little bit different for you guys from an educational perspective. The way we communicate and support is different. And you kind of stated this in the very beginning, is every year there's a new batch of 18-year-old students that start. And I think about my own children. I have a 27-year-old, and I have a soon-to-be, in a little less than 2 weeks, keeps reminding us, 15-year-old. And their interaction with technology, when my 27-year-old was 15, what technology was available and how he interacted with it is very different than what my 15-year-old does. And when he gets a year older, it's going to change and evolve yet again. So you guys are constantly looking at how to meet your customers where they live and with what they consume. So talk to me a little bit about that, because one of the things I have to admit, when we first started all those years ago, you were a very early adopter of Twitter, when it wasn't the thing that it is now, and being able to use that, and that kind of goes to this whole story.
Yeah, so in one of my former lives as a service desk manager, one of the things that I had found is, students aren't on email all day long like a faculty or staff member are. They're sitting in class, or they're on Facebook, Twitter, social media, they're texting, they're doing a lot of other things. And so when we would have an outage, historically what we would do is, if depending on the severity, obviously, is we would try to email people. And that would work to a certain point, but it did not completely reach everybody. And so we started thinking of ways that we could, as you say, meet them where they are, to let them know of widespread outages. But also, if we have this communication channel, not only can we communicate those outages that may be impacting their assignments or their abilities to submit work or that sort of thing, we could also use that as a channel for education purposes as well. And so Facebook and Twitter were the first things that we went to. That when I had student employees at my service desk, I watched them, I listened to them, I asked them, hey, what do you do? What do you think is fun as far as social media? I asked their opinion. Do you think this is a good way to go? Do you think it would be successful? So this wasn't just me kind of making a decision on my own. I did reach out for that feedback. And so when we ventured into Facebook and Twitter, our primary goal was that call deflection. We are I would say a mid-sized university at this point. Early on in my career, it was not quite as large. We have grown significantly over the last 20 years. So when you have a small university and a small pool of people who, man that service desk phone line, it's important to be creative and deflect as much of that as you can. So that was, primary goal, call deflection. Again, we were wanting to get it in front of them where they would see it. So again, social media was a big thing for our 18 to 22-year-olds at the time. So that's why we chose Facebook and Twitter. It was the most popular at the time. So that's where we went. So, as far as the education part of it, that's a way for us to get out the information about, phishing. How do you identify a phishing email? So that they, can see that, and when they get the next message, maybe they're not clicking on the link like they are today, and then causing, extra calls to the service desk because they've clicked on a link and now it's, spamming everybody in the university. So that was kind of our goal in mind: education, call deflection, and getting the information to them where they were at the time.
Well, and you start to look at how that's expanded as well with things like Walkup Support, which obviously with COVID being what it is and whatnot, many corporate entities have kind of suspended that for those that are back in the office. I know you guys just received great news there in Texas, where the handcuffs are going to come off shortly, and you'll be able to get back to some sense of normalcy. But one of the things that I look at with Walkup Support, I think about my daughter and her college experience, and she went to a very small institution where you can cross the whole campus in about 2 minutes. And when if you were having a challenge, you could go down to IT and get help. I'm having trouble, my laptop doesn't seem to want to get on the Wi-Fi, and they were able to help you. Or if you were having problems with your device, I think about my business partner's son who just started this year as a freshman at NYU. They made a recommendation. You can buy whatever computer you want, but we recommend Dell, and one of the reasons we recommend it is that our walk-up service desk is a Dell authorized repair center. So they're able to give out loaners, and they have parts, and they can do that stuff. So it becomes it's a more hands-on approach, which is kind of contrary to with the kids using the technology. But as my daughter always said, it's much faster to walk over there and they are able to see exactly what's going on. Oh, hey, this is the problem. Let me show you how to fix that if it comes up again. And it was really, really good. And we've seen a lot of our corporate entities prior to last year and the pandemic that we've all experienced, starting to spin up a walk-up support sort of function, because they've seen that mean time to resolution can be very, very shortened. Now, I don't even have to remote into your machine. I can see it, and then I look at it and go, well, one of the reasons your keyboard may not be working is it looks like you dropped this and you're missing a bunch of keys. Or one of the team members here at Excalibur, his wife, all of a sudden, and she's not exactly sure what happened, her screen went out on her. Well, it got on a call with Rob, and he pointed the camera at it. We could see that the LED screen had blown out, just based on what it was. He goes, I just wanted a second opinion. I was pretty sure it blew out somehow. Like, did it get bonked? What happened? Hook up an external monitor, use it, affect or repair. And but it can be a convenience thing to being able to, one, the call deflection, they're not calling in and then somebody's calling them back, and they can go walk up and get the support they need for the most common things that are needed. And when you start to look at your IT service management system, and I know you ventured into enterprise service management, and we'll talk about that a little more later. I think about one of my other universities that I worked with, where they leveraged their IT service management system for their I want to call it their housing department, but that wasn't what they had a special term for it. But
Residence life.
Yes, residence life. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And many years ago, they had already gone to everything being RFID tagged doors, so they could control where you could go. And surprisingly, students lose ID cards. I sat there for a week, the number of times people lost ID cards, I was shocked. I was like, holy, did we see that person like on Monday? Yeah, he's kind of a frequent flyer. But they had built their system out so people could have their picture on file, and if they went and said, hey, I need to get an ID card replacement, they were able to allow them to upload a new picture. They didn't like their picture, and then they weren't having to hunt around for stuff. They were able to generate a new ID card, pre-program it, not enable it until they came in. And sometimes it was they broke their ID card, or one of the things that I learned all about ID cards is some of them around certain edges, don't punch a hole in it because it'll render the ID card inoperative. And they'd have that happen. And they'd have to, I've got my ID card, but it won't open anything. Did you punch any holes in it? Well, yeah, I wanted to put it in the corner. I didn't like where you had it. There's a reason we have the slot where it is, because that's the only place the slot can go for the card to work. But looking at that as a service, and I looked at it as what a service desk does, and what's the number? One of the number one calls, top 5 calls in every service desk, password reset, right? One of the top 5 calls everywhere. And for them, this was rinse and repeat. It was the same 3 or 4 things all day, every day. And then they had started to expand into keeping some of the buildings more secure, but a student could request to be able to use a conference room, say for a project, and for their project members, and then be able to make that request, have it approved. And once it was approved right within the system, they could then grant them access, and the system knew, okay, well, not only do they need access to the door that opens the conference room, but the 3 doors they have to go through to get there. But they could limit, least use rights, as all of us are always looking for, to get to that room, and have it then time out on a particular expiration date. And it was kind of cool to kind of see, okay, this is just a service request like IT handles. Here's what they need. It's been approved. We're going to be able to give it to them. We're able to track all the things that are being done. And so it's extending your platform to serve other areas of the business, if you will, or needs of the campus, for the same customers that everybody else is dealing with. And that made it pretty neat. And they said, what used to happen before is people would basically come in and line up, and they would then have to process that stuff in real time. If they put it in ahead of time, for most of the students, it would be ready and waiting for them, because they could have it be processed throughout the day, and they could still handle walk-up things as needed. But it really cut down, again, that mean time to resolution. It cut down on that, cut down on the frustration. Oh my gosh, I can't wait in line any longer. I'm going to miss class. No, I can come in between classes. They've got it ready to go. They activate it. So it's using the technology to serve some of these things. And you know, a lot of times this is not stuff in the corporate environment that we end up having to deal with, and the technology, how rapidly it changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
We went from, I think about, you know, my college days, and the only thing my little card did was get me in the front door of my dorm.
Yep.
But we learned very, very quickly any card with a magnetic stripe would open the door as well. Not that at Carnegie Mellon we'd figure out how to reprogram other magnetic cards to open doors, but you know, and then you had a key for your dorm room. That was the funny thing. And my daughter's college was the same way. But then the other colleges have, you know, I know you guys, and all of the years I was there, it seemed like every time I came, there was a new building going up.
Yes, and that's still the case. But yes, you know, as far as, you know, having that walk-up support and everything, you know, 20 years ago when I started, we had two methods of contacting the service desk. It was by phone, or you walked up to a little window that we had in the lab and asked for your request. And so as we've, you know, grown and matured, you know, we have an ITSM program. This isn't our first system that we've had. This is our second or third at this point. And so that became a third option for you. You can call, walk in, or do this, you know, and now we've got a chat feature or remote support. So there are so many ways now that students, faculty, and staff can reach out for that support that they need and reach somebody.
Yeah,
So
the key is really that omni-channel, because it's because as you said, with the technological pace that your core customers move at, and the technology that they're used to being able to consume, you're almost forced to have that technology available. You can't say, well, we're going to get to Twitter at some point when everybody was already using it. It was an easy channel. Chat has become a channel that they prefer, and you talked about texting, right? You know, you certainly can send a text message, and it's funny because I was just dealing with this week myself. I'm a scout leader, as you're aware, and our troop is taking a trip to the Florida Sea Base. We're going to be going scuba diving for a week. Very exciting. We're all thrilled about it. But one of my adults, he's only 18, but he's considered he's an adult because he's 18, is a freshman in college. Well, he's the one that's not responding. And why is he not responding? Because I'm sending emails. So I hadn't gotten a response from him. We're ordering matching shirts because that's the thing you do. And he was the only one I hadn't heard from. So what I did is I said, okay, well, how do I communicate with an 18-year-old? I sent him a text message. Boom, instant response. And then he called me and apologized. I'll give him credit because he knows Mr. Fuson prefers phone calls. And he said, I just checked my email and I saw all of your emails from earlier this week. I had to laugh a little bit. He said, I checked my school email because the you know, assignment things and other things will come in automatically, but I hadn't checked my personal email. And that's why I missed it. Thank you for texting me. And I thought, well, hold on a second. You know, we're about to talk about this with Lucrecia, and it is just it's a real world scenario. It was communicating with him in a method that he's more apt to respond to me. It wasn't that he was missing it, and he probably would have gotten to it at some point, but I have kind of a deadline where I got to get this stuff ordered, and sent a text message and instantly had an answer. And we don't know what's going to be next. That's the other challenge that as institutions we face, is we don't know what's going to be next. And I think about, you know, things like when you think about K through 12, right? And I know you have a young one who's just starting his educational journey, and I think about the technology that they're exposed to in school. That, you know, we had a computer lab that had like 5 computers in it, you know, and you know, not that I'm that ancient, but we did have computers around in those days. But the technology that is pervasive and around them, and then with the pandemic moving to online schooling and them consuming the technology and to watch them it was very, very easy for them to consume the technology. And so we're constantly looking at those things. How do we communicate? How do we support? How do we keep up with what are the things that are driving our customers and our customer interaction? And we kind of move back to looking at kind of personas in the service catalog. Why does any of this even matter? Why do we care what they have access to in the service catalog? Well, it's not really a matter of, well, we don't want them to be able to put a request in for the accounting system if they're not allowed to, right? It's more the customer experience. Let's not bombard them with a bunch of stuff that if they put the request in for, it's going to come back that we're not going to fulfill it because they're not allowed to ask for it.
Right.
It's a convenience factor, and it's that customer experience that's so important. That we're providing a good customer experience, and we're letting them consume and see really that which is appropriate to them. And we kind of have this slide that we put together where we talk about students. So while students are able to consume certain things, they can request services, but they're not always the same services. Students and faculty can request something around the same system, but what they can request a lot of times can be different. And we talked about like the LMS as an example. A student may be having trouble accessing it or can't download something, or a faculty member is trying to get help setting the course up and uploading documents, which are two very different sides of that same system. And then there are things that only staff members have access to or can request. So service catalog design becomes very critical within the system. And you guys have gone through a number of iterations of your service catalog to really get it to where it is today. It's been an evolution, as we talked about, in order for it to represent the services that folks can consume. Talk to us a little bit about that journey of designing having a well-designed service catalog.
Right. So you are 100% correct when you say journey. This is in fact a journey, and one that you may not ever arrive at your final location, as we have found. I think we are probably on iteration number 4, maybe, of our service catalog. So when we first started out with our most recent ITSM platform, we took a lot of time and effort, and we spent a significant amount of time trying to identify what our services were, what types of requests that you could make against those services ultimately. And so what that evolved into, IT are, we're really technical, we are very literal type people sometimes, analytical, all of those things. So what that ended up turning out to be was a service catalog where you had, I think it was about 350 options that you could select. And we thought, wow, that's a whole lot of work that we do, here in IT. So we were kind of patting ourselves on the back. Well, when we put it out into the portal and start letting people make their request and everything, immediately people were like, "This is too overwhelming. I just need a password reset, or I just need a new calendar, or that sort of thing. Where do I go?" And so 6 months in, we're like, okay, we got to do something about this. It's causing maybe a few more calls back into our service desk than really what's necessary. So we went back in and we're like, how can we, condense all of these options down to, the important things, or the things that, when a faculty or staff member goes to our portal, they know immediately where they need to go by looking at the language. So one of the first things that we did for the next iteration was we involved our client base. We asked faculty and staff, hey, would you participate in this? We heard you, we understand this is a problem, help us make it better. And so we were selective about who we asked. We wanted a mix of technical and non-technical people. So, you know, one of the things that we ran into was the initial version of the service catalog said, you know, exchange, that's service. Well, that's what IT calls it, that's what it is, but to our faculty and staff, it was email, or it was my calendar, or my room resource, that sort of thing. And so that was one of kind of the eye-opening things, is like, they're looking for email, they're not looking for exchange. And so that was some of the valuable input that we got back from those technical and non-technical faculty and staff members that were on that focus group. So with their input, we designed another service catalog. We designed another portal, just the interface itself. We took the most common ask and we put those right up front on the main page. You didn't have to go browse our service catalog. It was right there. You just click a button. So we took all of that feedback, we designed it, we went back to that same focus group and said, okay, here's what we heard, here's what we've done, how'd we do, kind of a thing. And so we gave them the opportunity to kind of test drive the new system, and they were much more pleased at that point. They're like, yes, this makes much more sense, this is better. Here's one thing that could be better, maybe do it this way. And so we took that feedback again and made a few more tweaks, and then that kind of put us on a really good path at that point. So we have not gone back and solicited advice from our faculty and staff again. It's probably about time that we do that at this point. That was about 4 years ago, I guess, maybe at this point. So I can't stress enough to those people who are going through this implementation on their own, involve your customers and involve people outside of IT in your decision making and in your UX design. It is invaluable and could potentially cost you lessen some of the rework later on if you do so at the front.
Yeah, and as you said, it is a journey, and it doesn't, you know, you're not sure if it's ever going to end. And some of that is driven by, you know, one of the things that's unique in education is the speed at which the technology continues to evolve, and how your core customers, the students, are consuming it, and how you have to make it available. I think about things like, you know, in walk-up service desks, being able to get a loaner machine. You know, hey, you know, we're a repair center for this. We're going to give you a Chromebook so you can at least get online, check your email, do your things temporarily while we're working on, you know, getting you back in business. And the things that are constantly evolving, and then you have curveballs thrown at you like the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you had to pivot very rapidly to continue to do business. It wasn't just sending everybody home. There was a bit more to it.
Yeah, it was a little bit more to it. Thankfully, we had a lot of systems and processes kind of already in place. So we didn't have to start from scratch completely. You know, about this time last year, we were starting to plan on, okay, if, you know, they're expecting this thing to be a big thing, what do we need to do? And we started thinking through, okay, well, we need to accommodate for this situation and that situation and that sort of thing. So we started planning a little bit before, you know, everything shut down. But yes, it took us about a week. Once we kind of got the word, we extended our spring break like most everybody else did about that time. But that week we took and, you know, we made sure our tech tutorials that we have on our website, we made sure they were as in good a shape as we can get them. We created a new site for remote work and remote learning so that people understood all of the technology that they already had. It didn't take a pandemic for them to get it, but they may not have been aware of it. So we pulled all of those resources kind of into one location. And then, you know, it was the process of checking out laptops to people who needed them. If you had equipment at home you could use, great. You know, here's where you can go get Office, here's where you can go get Zoom, here's where you can go, you know, do all of these things. But yes, we very quickly, within a week's time, we went from all on campus or mostly on campus working and learning to nobody's on campus except for, you know, our essential staff, people literally keeping the lights on. So things can change real quick in education as far as everybody else is concerned too. The other thing a couple of weeks ago is we had a big, huge snow and ice storm here in Texas. So one of the things, I guess, good things maybe from the pandemic is, you know, everybody kind of already knew what to do when they had to work from home, or, you know, they could not get into, I mean, they could not get to campus. So they had those resources, they had that ability to continue, you know, working through that week that we had to shut down, provided they had power. So yeah, things can change in a very, very quick minute.
Yeah, and you know, all of us out there have experienced, you know, this to varying degrees with the pandemic. I know for us, the transition to Excalibur was somewhat easy because the majority of our staff already work from home, so they were already set up and enabled, and it wasn't super difficult. You know, and corporate entities had to pivot, but you guys are constantly pivoting with changes in technology. And you know, I think about, you know, our K through 12 district, and my ninth grader, and all of a sudden, you know, he's going to do online school, and they had already figured out how to do this with Chromebooks to keep costs contained, and leverage technology that not everybody had to go buy a laptop, or because we heard from so many families, as I was watching, you know, Facebook groups and whatnot, where people were kind of talking about, well, how are you handling? I'm having to let my, you know, my kid use my work laptop in order to do his school, because it's not like we have devices coming out our ears, and we see education tend to be very innovative, and you guys are willing to sometimes take a little bit of a leap of faith and try a technology that, as a corporate entity, it'd have to be a little more proven out before we'd be willing to take a flyer on it. And that's where some of the innovation comes from that the rest of us get to take advantage of. Is it's already been, yeah. And I think about, you know, your core customers, the students. You know, what better beta testers for stuff like that than folks that can pivot quickly with the technology? It's not a difficult thing for them, and you know, they're able to kind of work through some of the challenges, or self-serve in so many cases. You know, read this article and, okay, I got to change these settings, and you know, that may help some of my performance difficulties or what have you. It keeps it, you know, really interesting, and you know, and that's where we start to drive to that communications and support model. All of those different ways that we might communicate with a customer, right? And as you said, you started out with, you know, phone support and in a window they could walk up to, you know, and now we've got, you know, email support and self-service portals, and you guys are tweeting all over the place and using Facebook, and you know, chat support, and all the technologies to really provide that great customer experience, and really provide that omni-channel level of support. And you know, and you know, one of the things you noted, you know, they're not necessarily always in front of the computer to see an email, but they've got their cell phones. I don't know if Jackson has his surgically attached yet, but I'm sure it'll happen in the not too distant future. But you know, the kids are younger and younger, and they've got a cell phone for communications, but also, you know, for consuming some of the services that they consume.
Yeah, it's not quite an appendage yet, but he has his iPad that is not far from him a lot of times. But right now we've got our bluff in and tell him he can't be on it all day every day. But you know, you're talking about young students and how quick they are to adapt to technology. And some of this could just be because of who mom and dad are. But, with my son at, barely a year old, he'd pick up an iPad or an iPhone and he immediately knew what to do with it. He would swipe it and, up and down, left and right, tap things. I mean, he just kind of got it. And so we do find that with our students. And so when we have these, drastic changes, like with the pandemic, the students are fine. They're going to land on their feet. Where we look to support campus is in our faculty and staff. We have, extra webinars and things like that for those groups to say, hey, we know Zoom's been out there for a year or so, but let's dust off those that knowledge and let's get you primed for having to deliver your courses now 100% through this tool. So yes, absolutely changing your methodology there.
Yeah, and you guys are also have a decent population of what are referred to as non-traditional students.
Yes.
Which adds an extra layer of, I don't want to say complexity, but an extra layer of how you need to handle things.
Yes, they're different in their preferred methods of communication and obtaining support. So, our typical students, 18 to 22-year-olds, they'd rather text, they'd rather chat, they would rather do anything other than talk to somebody face to face or on the phone. So we try to keep that in mind for them. But our non-traditional students, along with a lot of our faculty and staff, they, instead of trying to go out and hunt for an answer on their own, they're more prone to pick up a phone and call us, or to stop by in person to have their questions asked and answered. That's just where they're comfortable in that interaction. So go ahead.
No, please go right ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you just have to take those things into consideration when you're planning your support modalities and your in all of those communication channels. You have to know your clients, your students. Do you have mostly traditional students, or do you have mostly non-traditional students? You have to know your people when you plan those things out.
Well, and one of the other things that we talked about when you start to look at the communications channels and other things is that you work with other departments as well, right? Mm-hmm. to try to make sure that word gets out on different things.
Sure.
In other maybe non-traditional ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as far as the I'm going to call them the non-sanctioned, I guess, communication channels. We've determined that email is our official communication method. So anything outside of that, we do have to build that following on our own. And so we do a lot of work with our students pre-pandemic anyway. In orientation sessions, we're like, hey, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, here's our handle, please go follow us. This is where you're going to find out information. We, tweet out tips and tricks. We do contests, we give away stuff. So, go like and follow us, that sort of thing. So we do put a considerable amount of effort in getting the followers that we have. We try to get them early through those orientation sessions. So hopefully we have their attention for 4 years while they're here. The other thing is you have to have good working relationships with the other social media managers on campus. So we weren't the first to Facebook and Twitter by any means, one of the first maybe, but we work closely with our main social media managers and say, hey, we've got this issue coming up. Can you reshare or retweet this so that it gets out in front of a larger population of our students at that point? And so it's really important to have those relationships and work with others to get that word out when we need to.
And you've done other simple things that have nothing to really do with technologies, from having a tent out in the food court
Yep.
or out on campus to raise awareness of that you guys are here and how they can interact with you.
Absolutely. So every October is, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so we try to engage our students during that time. This last year had to be mostly online, but prior to that, we do have a tent. We'd go set it up in the mall area out on campus. It's kind of a central location. It's real pretty, real flat, open. You can see a lot of people. But we would set up that tent. We would print out flyers. We would have giveaways. We would have all kinds of things out there related to cybersecurity, that as we were talking to our students, we would say, hey, we're on social media. Here's our handle. Go do it. Go do it right now. If you do it now, I'll give you a cup. Or, like, follow us, and then have 3 of your friends do it, and we'll give you a speaker, or, something like that. I mean, we do try to reward the follow as well. But yes, that was absolutely kind of a grassroots type effort to, get out there, see people face to face, interact with them, so that they know that we're not machines, we're actually humans here in IT, but also to get the follower numbers up as well.
So, and it is something that I've seen some of our corporate entities, again, pre-pandemic, starting to do, come by and learn about the new system and have a biscotti and coffee, right?
Yeah.
That human interaction, but also being able to create that visibility into things in a non-electronic fashion, right? It's in addition to, it complements all of the other things that are going on, which makes it a true, real omni-channel approach. Thank you so much, Lucrecia, for being with me today and sharing all of your knowledge and hopefully helping some of our customers and potential customers and friends out there on some of the challenges faced in education. I want to ask Tabitha, it looks like we have a couple of questions that have come in.
Yeah, we did have a couple questions come in. I'm not sure if you wanted to kick forward to a couple slides as well. So the first one, I'm going to let Lucrecia talk about the first half, and then I know, Mike, you might have a little bit of input for the second half, is what do you think is next for education and their IT service management platforms?
Lucrecia?
So what I think is going to be next is, I think we're going to need a product that is flexible, that's as flexible as what we need to be to serve our students and to change business as needed. So we need something that is very flexible, that can accommodate all of the things that we've just spent the last almost an hour talking about. We've got to have a tool that can support that. Also the ability to streamline workflows, to have built-in workflows that maybe even extend beyond IT. One of the things that comes to mind right now is maybe employee onboarding. Maybe there is a partnership that we can have with our HR department to say, as people are being hired, this thing kicks off, we get them their account, we get them their access, we get them, if they're remote workers, that sort of thing, we get them equipment, whatever we need to do. So I think the ability to be flexible and agile, as well as maybe bringing in other aspects of the business as well, that's beyond IT, is kind of where I see things moving at this point.
Yeah, and I would second that, Lucrecia. One of the things that we see many organizations doing is moving into enterprise service management. So with a powerful platform like what you guys leverage, which is Sharewell Service Management, you have the ability to also onboard other departments within the organization. And as I know, it's things that we've looked at Sam Houston, and so many of our customers look at. Many of the departments, they're managing work through a shared mailbox, and it can get a little ugly at times. And really all they're doing, as we know it in IT, is request management.
Yeah.
Who's the request for? Who's working on it? What are they asking for? and it's got a little bit of workflow maybe behind it. And we have the ability with platforms like what you have that have the ability to extend beyond IT and serve the overall enterprise in these areas where we just want to be able to better track and better control the work that's going on. And it helps us overall serve our customers that much better. And I've seen many of our clients that have kind of moved already in that direction where your portal starts to become a one-stop shop. I can come in and ask for an IT question that I have, or an HR question, or as we talked about with one of my other universities, something for residence life, or for this department or for that department. We don't have to have 17 different systems to do all of those things. We can have one place for them to go to do that. And I see that's a direction that we're moving, and I think we're going to continue to move there. Obviously, these systems can't replace every point system that's out there, but there's many things that they can help us do better. And with your experience with your platform and your team's experience with your platform, you have the knowledge to be able to help drive them. And in many cases, you've fallen in certain potholes, you can kind of guide them around as well. Well, yeah, that sounded like a good idea to us a couple of years ago, and we tried that, and that didn't work so well. So we're going to recommend you do this, and here's why. It starts to drive that ability to be more efficient and really provide a quality customer experience.
Well, thank you. So I'll ask one last question before I'll have Mike kind of close us out. So in Lucrecia, in your opinion, what other challenges or obstacles do you think the education space is going to face in the future, especially in the light of the ongoing pandemic?
Right. So one of the things that we've kind of already experienced to this point, and I see that it could potentially become more of a problem as we found that people can work from home in a university setting, is just the ability to get equipment to our faculty and staff who are working 100% remotely as they're being onboarded, making sure they have their laptop or webcam, that sort of thing. On the other side of that is, if things are broken, if they break, how do we get that equipment in to service it and then back to them? Do we look to create relationships with vendors where they just go to their nearest Microsoft store and turn it in for repair there, or Apple store? Or do we actually want them to mail it in? And how does that process look like? Also, as far as security goes, that's been a big thing over the pandemic, is how do you secure your organization with people everywhere using a variety of technology, maybe with a variety of security features. If they're using their own home computer, how do you make sure that they've got antivirus, that sort of thing. Also, as far as our equipment, how much access do we give them to their laptop to be able to install their own software or their own hardware? Do we care if they're doing that? Odds are we do, because we don't want to get in trouble for licensing and things like that we may not have. But I kind of see some of those as kind of the next kind of obstacles that are going to come down for universities.
Excellent. Well, Lucrecia, as I said, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all of your knowledge with the folks out there. I look forward to being able to get together again and talk about what that next evolution looks like. At Sam Houston, you guys certainly have just thinking of the years I've been with you, just how dramatically things have changed, and still providing that high level of customer experience as you guys have grown and evolved. So I very much look forward to that. Thank you, everybody who joined us today for our webinar. We look forward to seeing you again on a future webinar as we explore all kinds of topics around IT service management and enterprise service management. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.